In the fog-shrouded moors of Victorian England, a cryptic riddle tied to an ancient Andaluzite altar draws Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson into a labyrinth of deception. Blackthorn Manor, a crumbling estate steeped in legend, hides secrets of greed, betrayal, and a cursed gemstone said to bring death to those who seek its power. As murders unfold and riddles deepen, Holmes must unravel a mystery where every clue is a trap and the truth is more elusive than the shadows themselves. This tale of wit, suspense and revelation will keep you guessing until the final twist. Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Summons. The gas lamps of Baker Street flickered like weary sentinels as a November fog pressed against the windows of 221B. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of tobacco and the faint crackle of a dying fire. Sherlock Holmes lounged in his armchair, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, his eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the room. Dr. John Watson, sat opposite, attempting to chronicle one of our recent cases, though my pen faltered under the weight of his restless silence. "Watson," he said abruptly, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade, "you are writing again, and I wager embellishing the facts with your usual flair for the dramatic." I chuckled, accustomed to his barbs. "Merely striving to capture the essence of your methods, Holmes. The public demands a touch of colour." He waved a dismissive hand. "The public demands distraction, not truth, but no matter. I am bored, Watson. London offers no challenge tonight, no puzzle worthy of my attention." As if fate itself had overheard, a sharp rap echoed at the door. Mrs. Hudson entered, her face pinched with unease, holding a silver tray bearing a single letter. "This came for you, Mr. Holmes," she said, her voice low. "Delivered by a boy who vanished into the fog before I could question him." Holmes seized the envelope with a gleam in his eyes, as though it were a lifeline to his restless mind. The paper was heavy, cream-coloured, and sealed with a wax emblem depicting a coiled serpent around a gemstone. He broke the seal and unfolded the letter, his gaze darting across the lines. A faint smile curled his lips. "Curious," he murmured, passing the letter to me. The handwriting was elegant, almost archaic, penned in deep indigo ink. "To Mr. Sherlock Holmes. You are summoned to Blackthorn Manor, on the edge of Dartmoor, to unravel a riddle that has defied lesser minds. The Andaluzite altar holds secrets that threaten lives. Come at once, or blood will stain the moors. A carriage will await you at Paddington Station tomorrow at dawn. Discretion is paramount. A friend." I frowned, rereading the cryptic words. Andaluzite altar. "Holmes, this sounds like some Gothic tale spun by a novelist, not a case for a detective." "Precisely why it intrigues me," he replied, springing to his feet. "A riddle, an altar, a threat of bloodshed, all cloaked in anonymity. This is no ordinary summons, Watson. It is a challenge." His eyes gleamed with that familiar fire, the kind that heralded a case of singular complexity. "But who is this friend?" I pressed, "and why such secrecy?" Holmes paced before the hearth, his shadow dancing on the walls. The serpent and gem seal suggests a connection to something ancient, perhaps esoteric. Andaluzite, Watson, is a rare gemstone, known for its pleicroism, changing colours in different lights. A fitting metaphor for a mystery that shifts with perspective. As for the sender, their anonymity betrays either fear or calculation. We shall find out which. He paused, glancing at the clock. "Pack your revolver and your warmest coat. Dartmoor is unforgiving in November. We leave at first light." I hesitated, the letter's ominous tone lingering in my mind. "Holmes, this feels like a trap. The vagueness, the urgency." "Undoubtedly," he said, his smile widening. "And what is a trap but a puzzle waiting to be solved? Go, Watson. We have a carriage to catch." The next morning, as the first rays of dawn pierced the fog, we boarded a train at Paddington. The carriage awaiting us was a black, unmarked brougham, its driver a silent figure shrouded in a heavy cloak. As we rattled through London's waking streets, then out into the wild expanse of the countryside, I felt a growing unease. The moors loomed in the distance, their jagged outlines like the teeth of some ancient beast. Holmes, however, was alight with anticipation, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the window-pane. "What do you know of Blackthorn Manor?" I asked, seeking to break the silence. "Little, but enough," he replied. "An old estate owned by the Blackthorn family for centuries. Rumors speak of a lost treasure tied to an altar of Andalusite, said to be hidden somewhere on the grounds. The family fell into ruin decades ago, but recently one Sir Reginald Blackthorn returned from abroad, claiming to restore the estate. I suspect our summons is tied to him or his enemies." The carriage slowed as we reached the edge of Dartmoor. The air grew colder, the landscape bleaker. In the distance, Blackthorn Manor rose like a spectre against the grey sky, a sprawling pile of weathered stone, its towers clawing at the clouds. As we approached, a single raven perched on a gatepost, its eyes glinting as it watched us pass. "Watson," Holmes said softly, his gaze fixed on the manor. "Mark that bird. An omen, perhaps, or a sentinel. This case will demand all our wits." We stepped from the carriage, the gravel crunching beneath our boots. The manor's great oak doors loomed before us, carved with serpentine motifs that echoed the letter's seal. I felt a chill, not from the wind, but from the sense that we were stepping into a game whose rules we did not yet understand. Holmes turned to me, his expression unreadable. "The riddle begins here, Watson, and I suspect it will not end without blood." What did you think of the eerie summons that drew Holmes and Watson to Blackthorn Manor? Where are you listening this chilling tale from? Perhaps a cosy armchair by a fire, or somewhere as foggy as Dartmoor itself. Share your location and thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next thrilling chapter of Sherlock Holmes and the riddle of the Andalusite altar. Stay tuned for more mysteries, riddles, and revelations. Chapter 2. Journey to the Moors. The carriage lurched along the uneven track, its wheels grinding against the stony path as the moors of Dartmoor unfolded around us. The landscape was a desolate tapestry of gnarled heather and jagged outcrops, shrouded in a mist that seemed to cling to the earth like a living thing. John Watson sat opposite Sherlock Holmes, my hands gripping the edge of my seat as the brougham swayed. Holmes, however, appeared unperturbed, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon, as though the bleak expanse held secrets only he could decipher. The driver, a taciturn figure whose face remained hidden beneath a low-brimmed hat, had spoken not a word since we departed Paddington. His silence, coupled with the oppressive stillness of the moors, set my nerves on edge. I glanced at Holmes, hoping to draw him into conversation to ease my unease. "Holmes," I ventured, "this place feels forsaken. Do you truly believe a riddle, of all things, warrants such a journey?" He turned his gaze to me, a faint smirk playing at his lips. The moors, Watson, are a stage for secrets. Their desolation invites concealment, perfect for a riddle that promises bloodshed. I am more concerned by what awaits us at Blackthorn Manor than the journey itself. I nodded, though his words did little to quell the growing sense of foreboding. The carriage creaked as we ascended a low hill, and the manor came into sharper focus, a brooding silhouette against the leaden sky. Its towers, half crumbled, seemed to lean inward, as if guarding some ancient shame. The wind carried a low moan, and I shivered, pulling my coat tighter. "Observe," Holmes said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of standing stones on a distant ridge. "Megaliths, likely Bronze Age. They mark this land as one of ritual and mystery. Our Andalusite altar may have roots deeper than the Blackthorn family sit's history." Before I could respond, the carriage jolted to a stop. The driver dismounted with unnatural swiftness, opening the door without meeting our eyes. "Blackthorn Manor," he muttered, his voice rough as gravel. "You expected." We stepped onto the gravel drive, the chill air biting at my face. The manor loomed closer now, its windows dark and uninviting, like the eyes of a corpse. Holmes paused, his gaze sweeping the grounds. A faint trail of smoke rose from a chimney, the only sign of life within. But it was the ground beneath our feet that drew his attention, a series of faint, irregular impressions in the gravel, leading toward a copse of twisted yew trees. "Footprints," he murmured, crouching to examine them. "Recent, made within the hour. A man, heavy-set, wearing boots with a distinctive square heel. He was in a hurry, Watson, and not alone. See the smaller, lighter prints overlapping his." I squinted at the marks, barely discernible in the dim light. A meeting, perhaps, or someone fleeing. "Or pursuing," Holmes said, straightening. "The game is already afoot." As we approached the manor's great oak doors, a low, guttural sound broke the silence. A howl not of a beast, but of something human, tinged with anguish. It came from within the house, echoing through the stone walls. I reached for my revolver, but Holmes' hand stayed mine. "Patience, Watson," he said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. "We are guests here, not invaders, yet." The doors creaked open before we could knock, revealing a gaunt figure in a butler's livery. His face was pale, his eyes hollow as though he had not slept in days. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice trembling. "I am Giles, the steward. Sir Reginald awaits you in the great hall. Please, follow me." We stepped into a cavernous foyer, its walls lined with faded tapestries depicting serpents and gemstones, their threads fraying like the manor itself. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone and old wood. Giles led us through a maze of corridors, each turn revealing more decay, peeling wallpaper, cracked mirrors, and portraits whose subjects seemed to watch us with silent accusation. "Tell me, Giles," Holmes said as we walked, his tone deceptively casual, "how long have you served the Blackthorn family?" 30 years, sir," the butler replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since I was a lad. But the manor, its sits changed since Sir Reginald returned. Strange folk come and go now, and their sits talk of curses." Holmes' eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, filing the information away like a card in his mental index. We entered the great hall, a vast chamber dominated by a long oak table and a massive fireplace, its hearth cold and dark. At the far end stood a man in his 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a mane of silver hair and a face etched with both authority and strain. Sir Reginald Blackthorn. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice resonant but edged with unease, "I am grateful you come. The matter is delicate and urgent." Holmes inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "Your letter spoke of a riddle and an Andalusite altar. I trust you will elaborate, Sir Reginald, for I am not accustomed to working in the dark." Sir Reginald hesitated, glancing at Giles, who bowed and retreated. "It began a month ago," he said, lowering his voice. "A riddle, carved into a shard of Andalusite, was left on my desk. It spoke of an altar hidden within these walls, a relic of my ancestors. It promised wealth, but warned of death. Since then, strange occurrences, whispers in the night, objects moved, and now a threat to my family." He produced a small shimmering stone from his pocket, its surface catching the light in hues of green and amber. The Andalusite. Carved into it were words, barely legible. "Seek the altar where shadows fall, but beware the serpent's call." Holmes took the stone, turning it in his fingers. "Intriguing," he said softly. "And who else resides in this manor? Sir Reginald, I assume we are not alone." "My family," he replied. "My sister, Lady Eleanor, a scholar of antiquities, my nephew Victor, a reckless sort, and my niece Clara, who keeps to herself. There sits also Dr. Mortimer Crane, an archaeologist studying the estate's history. They sit all here, waiting to meet you." As he spoke, a shadow moved at the edge of the hall, a figure, half hidden behind a tapestry. Holmes' eyes flicked toward it, but he said nothing. I felt a prickle of unease, as though the walls themselves were watching. "Tonight," Sir Reginald continued, "we dine together. You shall meet them all. But I warn you, Mr. Holmes, trust no one. The riddle has stirred something dark in this house." Holmes smiled, a glint of excitement in his eyes. Then let us dine, Sir Reginald, and let the riddle unfold." Chapter 3. The Gathering of Heirs. The great hall of Blackthorn Manor seemed to shrink under the weight of its own shadows as Holmes and I were ushered to the dining table. The flickering light of a chandelier, its candles half melted, cast wavering patterns across the oak-panelled walls, where portraits of stern-faced Blackthorns glared down, as if judging the living. The air was thick with the scent of wax and roasted pheasant, but an undercurrent of tension soured the atmosphere. I, Dr. John Watson, felt my pulse quicken, sensing that this gathering was no mere formality, but the opening act of a drama Sherlock Holmes was eager to dissect. Sir Reginald Blackthorn stood at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the candlelight as he gestured for us to sit. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he said, his voice steady but laced with strain, "allow me to introduce my family and our guest." To his right sat Lady Eleanor Blackthorn, a woman of perhaps 50, her sharp features framed by auburn hair streaked with grey. Her eyes, a piercing green, studied Holmes with the intensity of a hawk. She wore a high-necked gown adorned with a brooch shaped like a serpent, its eyes glinting with tiny gemstones, and a last sight, I noted, recalling the riddle's cryptic shard. "A pleasure, Mr. Holmes," she said, her tone cool but polite. "I trust you're not here to indulge my brother's superstitions about curses." Holmes inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Superstition often cloaks truth, Lady Eleanor. I am here to uncover the latter." Next to her was Victor Blackthorn, Sir Reginald's nephew, a young man in his late 20s, with a dishevelled air and a smirk that suggested defiance. His cravat was loosely tied, and his dark eyes darted about the room as though expecting trouble or perhaps inviting it. "So, you're the great detective," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Hope you're not wasting your time on ghost stories. This manor's got enough of those without your help." "Ghosts are rarely as interesting as the living," Holmes replied, his gaze lingering on Victor Fest's restless hands, and far less likely to leave footprints in the gravel. Victor's smirk faltered, but before he could respond, a soft voice drew our attention. Clara Blackthorne, Sir Reginald's niece, sat opposite, her delicate frame almost lost in the high-backed chair. Her pale blonde hair fell in loose waves, and her blue eyes were downcast, fixed on her untouched plate. "Please, let's not speak of such things," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "This house is heavy enough, without talk of riddles and death." The final figure at the table was Dr. Mortimer Crane, the archaeologist Sir Reginald had mentioned. A wiry man with thinning hair and spectacles perched precariously on his nose. He exuded nervous energy, his fingers drumming on the tablecloth. "Mr. Holmes," he said, his voice high and eager, "I've read of your methods. The Andalusite altar is a remarkable find. If it exists, my studies suggest it's tied to pre-Christian rituals, perhaps even sacrificial." "Sacrificial," I echoed, unable to mask my unease. Crane nodded, pushing his spectacles up. "The legends speak of a gemstone altar that shifts colors like Andalusite, used to appease ancient deities. Blood was its price, or so the tales claim." Lady Eleanor scoffed, her brooch glinting as she leaned forward. "Dr. Crane, your obsession with old stones blinds you to reason. This is a family matter, not some pagan fairy tale." "Yet the riddle was carved on Andalusite," Holmes interjected, his tone deceptively mild. "And riddles like altars are rarely crafted without purpose. Tell me, Sir Reginald, who else has seen this shard?" Sir Reginald hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Only those at this table. I kept it locked in my study until last night, when it vanished." A murmur rippled through the group. Victor laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Vanished or stolen, uncle. Seems your precious altar sets already causing trouble." Clara Sip's hands trembled, and she clasped them tightly in her lap. "It stews," she whispered. "I told you, uncle, we should leave this place." "Nonsense," Lady Eleanor snapped, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. "Theft is no curse. Someone in this house is playing games." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled, his gaze moving from face to face. "Games indeed," he said softly. "But games have rules, and I intend to learn them. Sir Reginald, you mentioned strange occurrences. Elaborate." Before Sir Reginald could answer, a piercing scream tore through the hall, echoing from somewhere deep within the manor. The candles flickered as if caught in a sudden draught, and Clara gasped, her face paling to the colour of ash. Victor swore under his breath, while Dr. Crane's spectacles slipped down his nose. Lady Eleanor's hand tightened around her wineglass, but she remained composed. "Giles," Sir Reginald bellowed, rising from his chair. The butler appeared at once, his gaunt face even paler than before. "What was that?" "It came from the east wing, sir," Giles stammered, "near the old chapel." Holmes was already on his feet, his eyes alight with that predatory gleam I knew so well. "Lead the way, Giles. Watson, your revolver, if you please." I patted my coat pocket, ensuring the weapon was at hand, and followed Holmes as he strode after the butler. The others trailed behind, their footsteps uneven on the stone floor. The corridors grew narrower and colder as we approached the east wing, the air heavy with the scent of mildew and something sharper, iron perhaps, or blood. We reached a heavy door, its wood blackened with age and carved with the same serpentine motifs I had seen at the manor's entrance. Giles fumbled with a key, his hands shaking, and pushed the door open to reveal a small chapel. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern, its light casting long shadows across rows of dusty pews and a cracked stone altar, not andallusite, but plain granite, stained with age. At the foot of the altar lay a figure, motionless, face down on the floor. A pool of dark liquid spread beneath them, glinting in the lantern's glow. Clara stifled a cry, and Victor muttered something unintelligible. Dr. Crane pushed forward, only to be stopped by Holmes' outstretched arm. "Stay back," Holmes said sharply, kneeling beside the body. He turned it gently, revealing the ashen face of a young woman, her eyes wide with terror, her throat marked by a single precise cut. In her clenched fist was a shard of andalusite, identical to the one Sir Reginald had shown us, its surface etched with new words: "The altar sees, the serpent strikes." Holmes' detached expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with intensity. "Watson, examine the wound. The rest of you, remain where you are." I knelt beside him, my medical training overriding my shock. The cut was clean, surgical, made with a blade no wider than an inch. "She sits been dead less than an hour," I said, my voice steady despite the horror. "The wound suggests a skilled hand, someone who knew exactly where to strike." Holmes nodded, his fingers tracing the andalusite shard without touching it. "A second riddle," he murmured, "and a second player in this deadly game." Sir Reginald Sipt's voice trembled as he spoke. "That Sipt's Mary, our housemaid. She was alive at supper. Who could have done this?" Holmes stood, his gaze sweeping the chapel. "Someone who moves unseen in this house. Someone who knows its secrets." He turned to the group, his voice cold, "and someone who is watching us now." The shadows seemed to thicken, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold stone walls. The riddle of the andalusite altar had claimed its first victim, and I knew with a sinking certainty that it would not be the last. Chapter 4. The first riddle unveiled. The chapel's air grew colder as the reality of Mary's death settled over us like a shroud. The flickering lantern cast grotesque shadows on the walls, where faded frescoes of serpents and gemstones seemed to writhe in the dim light. "Aye, Doctor." John Watson stood beside Sherlock Holmes, my hand still near my revolver, though the threat felt intangible, as if the manor itself were the enemy. The group, Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Victor, Clara, and Dr. Crane, huddled near the chapel door, their faces a tableau of shock, fear, and suspicion. Holmes knelt by the body once more, his movements precise, almost reverent, as he examined the andalusite shard clutched in Mary's lifeless hand. The carved words, "The altar sees, the serpent strikes," glinted with an eerie sheen, the gemstone shifting from green to amber as he tilted it. "Watson," he said, his voice low, "note the precision of the carving. No hesitation in the strokes. This was not done in haste." I nodded, though my attention was drawn to the group. Clara's eyes were red with unshed tears, her delicate frame trembling. Victor's smirk was gone, replaced by a tense scowl as he glanced at the shadows. Lady Eleanor stood rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line, while Dr. Crane muttered to himself, adjusting his spectacles as if they could shield him from the horror. Sir Reginald's hands shook as he gripped the doorframe, his authority crumbling. "Giles," Holmes called, not looking up. "When was Mary last seen alive?" The butler, hovering at the edge of the group, swallowed hard. "At supper, sir. Serving the wine. She left the hall around 8 o'clock to fetch more candles. I thought she sit'd gone to her quarters after." Holmes' eyes flicked to the altar, a cracked slab of granite that seemed out of place in the chapel sits decay. "And this altar, has it been disturbed recently?" Giles hesitated, glancing at Sir Reginald, who nodded. "Not to my knowledge, sir," the butler said. "The chapel sip's been locked for years. Only Sir Reginald and I have keys." "Yet someone entered," Holmes said, standing and brushing dust from his coat. "Someone with access or skill enough to bypass a lock." He turned to the group, his gaze sharp as a blade. "The riddle on this shard is a message, but to whom and why, Mary?" Lady Eleanor Steed's voice cut through the silence, icy and controlled. "She was a servant, Mr. Holmes, likely in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is no riddle. It's Dee's madness." "Madness follows patterns, Lady Eleanor," Holmes replied, his tone dry. "And patterns are my domain. Watson, assist me." I followed him to the altar, where he ran his fingers along its edges, his brow furrowed. The stone was weathered, its surface etched with faint lines that might have been runes, though time had worn them nearly invisible. Holmes tapped the slab, producing a hollow echo. "Curious," he murmured, pressing harder. A faint click sounded, and a section of the altar's base shifted, revealing a narrow compartment. The group gasped as Holmes reached inside, withdrawing a second shard of Andalusite, larger than the first, its surface etched with another riddle. "Beneath the serpent's gaze, the truth lies cold. Seek the hollow heart where secrets are told." A small iron key, rusted but intact, lay beside it, glinting in the lantern's glow. "Another riddle," I said, my voice tight. "And a key. To what?" Holmes held the key up, his eyes narrowing. "To a lock that guards the altar Steck's secrets, or its curse." "Sir Reginald, where in this manner might we find a soul-hole heart Steck's?" Sir Reginald Set's face paled further. "If that were possible. The old library," he said hoarsely. "There serves a hearth there, carved with serpents. Its set's been sealed since my father Set's time, but there were stories of a hidden chamber." Victor snorted, though his bravado seemed forced. "Stories, uncle? You surge chasing fairy tales while a girl sits dead. This is no game." "On the contrary," Holmes said, pocketing the key and shard. "It is a game, and the stakes are deadly. Whoever left this riddle wanted it found, wanted us to find it. The question is why." Dr. Crane stepped forward, his voice trembling with excitement. "The Andalusian altar. It must be close. The legends say it was hidden to protect its power. These riddles are a map, Mr. Holmes. Or a trap." Lady Eleanor countered, her eyes flashing. "You search all too eager to chase myths, but someone in this house is a murderer." Clarice Steck's voice, barely a whisper, broke the tension. "It's Steck's the altar. It's Steck's watching us. I felt it last night, in my dreams, a serpent, coiling, waiting." Holmes' gaze softened briefly, as he looked at her, but his tone remained firm. "Dreams are shadows, Miss Clara, but evidence is light. We shall proceed to the library. Gills, lead the way." The butler nodded, his hands still trembling, and we followed him through the manor's labyrinthine corridors. The walls seemed to close in, their tapestries depicting serpents that now felt like warnings. The library was a cavernous room, its shelves sagging under dust-covered tomes, the air thick with the scent of mouldering paper. At its centre stood a massive hearth, its mantle carved with a serpent whose eyes were set with Andalusite gems, their colours shifting in the dim light. Holmes approached the hearth, running his fingers along the carvings. "The hollow heart," he said softly, inserting the iron key into a barely visible slot beneath the serpent's head. A low grinding sound filled the room as the hearth slid aside, revealing a dark passage descending into the earth. A collective intake of breath echoed behind us. Victor swore, Clara whimpered, and Dr. Crane's eyes gleamed with scholarly zeal. Lady Eleanor's expression was unreadable, but her hand gripped her brooch tightly. Holmes turned to the group, his voice calm but commanding. "We have found the path to the Riddle Sipt's heart, but I warn you, stay close and touch nothing. The serpent Sipt strike is not yet done." As we prepared to descend, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows, a flicker, as if someone had lingered just beyond the lantern's reach. I glanced at Holmes, but his attention was fixed on the passage ahead, his silhouette framed by the darkness below. The riddle was unfolding, but each step felt like a descent into a trap we could not yet see. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The passage beneath the library hearth descended like a vein into the heart of Blackthorn Manor, its stone steps worn smooth by centuries of secret footsteps. The air grew heavier with each descent, laden with the earthy scent of damp soil and ancient decay. John Watson held the lantern high, its flame flickering against walls etched with faint carvings, serpents coiling around gem-like symbols that seemed to pulse in the shifting light. Sherlock Holmes led the way, his silhouette sharp and purposeful, while the others followed in a tense procession. Sir Reginald's heavy breathing echoing behind me, Lady Eleanor's measured steps, Victor's muttered curses, Clara's soft whimpers, and Dr. Crane's excited whispers to himself. Holmes paused at a landing. His hand raised for silence, the passage widened into a small antechamber, its walls lined with shelves bowed under the weight of leather-bound volumes and yellowed parchments. A single torch sconce, unlit for ages, hung crookedly, and in the centre stood a pedestal bearing a dusty ledger, its cover embossed with the Blackthorn serpent crest. "This is no mere cellar," Holmes said, his voice echoing softly. "This is an archive, a repository of the manor's shadows. Sir Reginald, you spoke of stories. Now is the time to illuminate them." Sir Reginald stepped forward, his face gaunt in the lantern's glow. "My ancestors were collectors of the arcane," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "The Blackthorns traced their line to the Druids, or so the legends claim. The Andalusite altar was said to be a relic from those times, a stone of prophecy, carved from a gem that changes with the light, revealing truths or deceptions depending on one's intent." Dr. Crane interjected, his eyes wide behind his spectacles. "Precisely. Andalusite, with its pleochroic properties, was revered in ancient rituals. The altar was used for divinations, but it demanded a price, blood, to bind the seeker to its will. The legends say it cursed those who misused it, driving them to madness or death." Lady Eleanor crossed her arms, her brooch catching the light like a warning. Legends spun by fools, Dr. Crane. My father dismissed them as superstition. The real curse is greed. Our family's fortunes dwindled, chasing such myths. Victor leaned against the wall, his smirk returning, though strained. Greed. Speak for yourself, Aunt. Uncle Reginald returned from his exotic travels with tales of buried treasures. That's why we're all here, isn't it? Hunting for gold, wrapped in riddles. Clara shivered, drawing closer to me. It's more than gold, she whispered. I've seen it in dreams. The altar glowing, whispering names. It knows our secrets. Holmes ignored the bickering, his attention fixed on the ledger. He brushed off the dust and opened it, the pages crackling like dry leaves. The entries were in faded ink, a chronicle of the Blackthorn lineage spanning centuries.
Here,
He said, pointing to a passage dated 1642. The altar of shifting stone was concealed this day, lest its curse claim more souls. The serpent guards it, but the riddles will guide the worthy, or doom the fool. Signed by Elias Blackthorn. He flipped through more pages, his fingers tracing the script. Subsequent entries speak of attempts to find it, madness in 1720, a disappearance in 1805, and in 1857, a murder attributed to the serpent strike. The patterns repeat, riddles appear, lives are lost, and the altar remains hidden. Sir Reginald nodded gravely. My grandfather searched for it obsessively. He believed it held a fortune in gems, embedded in the altar itself, but he died penniless, raving about shadows that watched him. Holmes closed the ledger with a snap, his eyes gleaming. Shadows of the past, indeed. But these riddles are not echoes, they are deliberate. Someone has revived this legend, using it as a veil for murder. He scanned the shelves, pulling down a rolled parchment. Unfurling it revealed a map of the manor, and its grounds, marked with cryptic symbols, serpents at key points, and a central altar sketched in red ink. This map is incomplete, Holmes observed, tracing a line that led deeper into the passage. But it points to a chamber beneath the moors. The hollow heart may be literal, a cavern. Dr. Crane leaned in, his breath quickening. I've studied similar sites on Dartmoor. There are barrows and caves tied to druidic rites. If the altar is there, it could be priceless, scientifically at least. Lady Eleanor snatched the map from Holmes' hands, her face hardening. Priceless or deadly. We've already lost Mary. Chasing this further invites more blood. Refusing to chase it invites the same, Holmes countered, retrieving the map with a swift motion. The killer wants us to follow, or fears we will. Watson, your thoughts? I adjusted the lantern, the flame steadying my nerves. The wound on Mary was precise. Holmes. Not the work of a phantom, but a human hand, perhaps one versed in anatomy, like a doctor or scholar. My words hung in the air, and Dr. Crane flushed, adjusting his spectacles. Are you implying? Implying nothing, Holmes said smoothly. Merely observing, but observation leads to truth. Let us proceed. The passage narrowed again, twisting downward until the air grew chill and moist, the sound of dripping water echoing ahead. We emerged into a larger cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness, stalactites hanging like fangs. In the center, illuminated by our lantern, stood a crude stone table, not the altar we sought, but a marker, etched with yet another riddle, on a slab of andalusite embedded in its surface. In shadows deep, where echoes sleep, the past's cold breath reveals the keep. Holmes knelt, examining the slab. Echoes, he murmured, a clue to acoustics perhaps. Watson, strike the wall. I complied, tapping the cavern wall with my revolver's butt. A hollow ring answered, suggesting a void beyond. Holmes smiled faintly. The past hides chambers within chambers. As he probed the wall, a sudden gust extinguished the lantern, plunging us into blackness. Panic rippled through the group. Clara cried out, Victor cursed, and Sir Reginald called for calm. I fumbled for matches, but Holmes' voice cut through the dark. Still yourselves. Listen. In the silence, a faint whisper echoed, like wind through cracks forming words. The serpent strikes. The voice faded, and I struck a match, relighting the lantern. The group was intact, but Lady Eleanor's face was ashen, and Dr. Crane clutched his chest. A trick, Holmes said, though his eyes scanned the shadows warily. Vents in the rock carry sound from above. Someone is manipulating us. Victor laughed nervously. Or the curse is real. Either way, I'm done with this hole. Not yet, Holmes insisted, finding a loose stone in the wall. It shifted, revealing a small alcove containing a bundle of letters, yellowed with age. He unfolded one, reading aloud. Dearest Elias, the altar's power is too great. Hide it, or it will consume us all. Dated 1642. The letters detailed a family pact to conceal the altar after a ritual gone wrong, resulting in deaths. Betrayal among kin, Holmes said softly, a motive that echoes today. Sir Reginald's eyes widened. My ancestors they killed to protect it, or to claim it, Holmes replied. The shadows of the past cast long, and in this family they may yet kill again. As we retreated from the cavern, the weight of history pressed upon us, the riddles weaving a tapestry of deceit that bound the living to the dead. The Andalusite altar loomed closer, but so did the danger, lurking in the bloodlines of Blackthorn Manor. Chapter 6. Midnight Whispers. The clock in Blackthorn Manor's great hall struck midnight with a resonant toll that echoed through the corridors like a funeral knell. I, Dr. John Watson, lay in the guest chamber assigned to me, a room heavy with the weight of antiquity, its four-poster bed draped in faded velvet, and its walls adorned with tapestries that seemed to stir in the draughts. Sleep eluded me. The events of the day replaying in my mind, Mary's tragic death, the riddles etched in Andalusite, and the cavern's chilling whispers. Sherlock Holmes had retired to his own room hours earlier, insisting on solitude to ponder the clues, but I knew his mind would churn ceaselessly through the night. A faint creak from the floorboards outside my door set my nerves on edge. I sat up, straining to listen. The manor was alive with sounds at this hour, the groan of settling beams, the distant howl of wind across the moors. But this was different, deliberate. Slipping from the bed, I donned my dressing gown and crept to the door, my revolver in hand. The hallway beyond was dimly lit by a single gas lamp, its flame sputtering as if protesting the darkness. As I stepped into the corridor, a soft whisper reached my ears, indistinct at first, like the rustle of leaves. It grew clearer, forming words. The altar calls, blood for truth. The voice was ethereal, seeming to emanate from the walls themselves. My heart pounded as I followed the sound, padding silently toward the east wing where the chapel lay. The whispers intensified, now accompanied by a low rhythmic chanting that sent chills down my spine. I paused at a corner, peering around to see a shadowy figure gliding down the hall. Clara Blackthorn, her nightgown flowing like a ghost's shroud, her eyes wide and unseeing. She moved as if in a trance, murmuring the same words that echoed around us. "Miss Clara," I whispered urgently, stepping forward. She did not respond, continuing her somnambulistic path toward the chapel door, which stood ajar despite our earlier efforts to secure it. I followed, cautious not to startle her, recalling from my medical knowledge the dangers of abruptly waking a sleepwalker. Inside the chapel, the air was colder than before, the granite altar bathed in moonlight, filtering through a cracked stained glass window. Clara approached it, her hands outstretched, and knelt before the stone, her lips moving in silent prayer or incantation. The whispers swelled, now distinctly her voice, though amplified and distorted. "The serpent awakens, the riddle binds." I hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. "Clara, wake up! You're dreaming!" Her eyes snapped open, terror flooding her features. She gasped, scrambling back against the altar. "Dr. Watson! What? Where am I?" "You were sleepwalking," I said, helping her to her feet. "You came here, whispering about the altar." She trembled, clutching my arm. "The dreams, they're getting worse. I hear voices, see the serpent coiling around the Andalus, demanding sacrifice. It's not just legend, it's real, pulling at my mind." Before I could reassure her, a sharp cry echoed from the corridor, Lady Eleanor's voice laced with alarm. We hurried out to find the household roused, Lady Eleanor in her robe, her face stern, Victor dishevelled and bleary-eyed, holding a candlestick like a weapon, Sir Reginald looking haggard, and Dr. Crane peering from his doorway with wide eyes. Holmes emerged last, fully dressed, as if he had never slept, his expression alert. "What is the meaning of this commotion?" Holmes demanded, his gaze sweeping the group. I explained quickly. "The whispers, Clara's trance, the chapel." Holmes' eyes narrowed as he listened. Then he turned to Clara. "Describe the voices precisely, Miss Blackthorne. Were they internal, or did they seem external?" "Both," she said, her voice quavering, "like echoes in my head, but also from the walls. They spoke of blood and truth, the serpent's call." Holmes nodded, striding to the chapel. We followed, the group clustering behind. He examined the walls, tapping them methodically. "Acoustic tricks, perhaps. This manor is riddled with passages, vents that carry sound." Dr. Crane adjusted his spectacles, stepping forward. "Or psychotropic influences. Some ancient sites emit gases that induce hallucinations. If the altar is near, it could explain the dreams." Victor scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously. "Gases? Dreams? Someone's playing us for fools. Those whispers woke me too, sounded like they came from the library." Lady Eleanor crossed her arms. "Enough speculation. Clara, you need rest. This hysteria is unbecoming." But Clara shook her head, her fear giving way to determination. "No, Aunt, it's not hysteria. Last night I found this in my room." She produced a small shard of Andalusite from her pocket, etched with words, "Midnight whispers reveal the path, but silence the heart or face the wrath." Holmes took the shard, his fingers tracing the carving. "Another riddle, delivered personally. The game escalates." He turned to Sir Reginald, who has access to the guest quarters. "Only Giles and the family," Sir Reginald replied, his brow furrowed. "But the doors were locked." "Locks are illusions for the unskilled," Holmes said dismissively. "Watson, you heard the whispers externally. Describe them." "The frill, distorted," I said, "like wind through pipes forming words." Holmes paced the chapel, his mind visibly racing. A speaking tube system, perhaps, hidden in the walls, used by smugglers or spies in older estates, or a modern contrivance to simulate the supernatural. He paused at the altar, pressing its edges as he had before. A faint click sounded, and a small panel slid open, revealing a coiled tube of brass connected to a mouthpiece disguised as a carving. "Ah," Holmes said, satisfaction in his voice. "A phonographic device, rudimentary but effective. Someone has been broadcasting these whispers to sow fear." The group murmured in astonishment. Dr. Crane leaned in, fascinated. "Ingenious. It could be linked to other rooms." Victor grinned, though uneasily. "So no curse, just a prankster with toys." "Not a prank," Holmes corrected sharply. "A manipulator, using fear to control. The question is motive." He traced the tube into the wall, where it vanished into the stone. "This leads deeper, perhaps to the source of the riddles." Sir Reginald's face hardened. "We must follow it. End this tonight." Holmes agreed, and we armed ourselves with lanterns and tools from the manor. The tube guided us through a hidden door behind the altar into a narrow tunnel that snaked beneath the house. The air was stale, the walls damp with condensation. As we progressed, the whispers returned, fainter now, mocking our pursuit. After what felt like hours but was mere minutes, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, cluttered with artifacts, ancient tomes, gem fragments, and a workbench strewn with carving tools and Andalusite shards. In the center sat a phonograph, its horn aimed at a network of tubes branching into the walls. "The lair of our whisperer," Holmes said, examining the workbench. "Fresh carvings, the riddles were made here." Clara gasped, pointing to a journal on the bench. "That's Mary's handwriting. She was involved." Holmes flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. "Not willingly. Entries speak of coercion, threats to her family if she didn't assist. She carved the shards, placed them under duress." Lady Eleanor's voice was cold. "Then the killer silenced her when she became a liability." "Precisely," Holmes said. "But who coerced her?" He held up a letter from the journal. "Do as instructed, or your brother pays the price. The serpent watches." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "This is getting too close. Someone in the family?" Before Holmes could respond, a grinding noise filled the chamber, the entrance ceiling shut with a slab of stone. Darkness enveloped us as lanterns flickered out, and the whispers boomed, "Silence the heart or face the wrath." Panic ensued, cries, pounding on the stone. Holmes' voice cut through, calm. "It's a trap, but traps have weaknesses." In the suffocating dark, I felt the group's fear mount, the midnight whispers now a cacophony of doom. The riddle had ensnared us, and escape seemed as elusive as the altar itself. Chapter 7. The Second Riddle's Trap. The chamber's darkness was absolute, a suffocating veil that amplified every breath, every shuffle of feet. Dr. John Watson, pressed against the cold stone wall, my heart racing as the whispers faded into mocking silence. The air grew stale, heavy with the scent of earth and fear. Holmes' voice, calm amid the chaos, anchored us. "Panic serves the trapper, not the trapped. Watson, your matches, light a lantern, if any remain." I fumbled in my pocket, striking a match that flared briefly, illuminating faces etched with dread. Clara's tear-streaked cheeks, Victor's clenched jaw, Lady Eleanor's steely resolve, Dr. Crane's wide-eyed terror, and Sir Reginald's slumped shoulders. One lantern sputtered to life, its weak flame casting long shadows that danced like spectres on the walls. Holmes wasted no time, his fingers probing the sealed entrance, a slab of stone that had descended seamlessly from the ceiling. "Mechanisms like this require triggers," he said, his tone analytical. "A counterweight perhaps, or a lever disguised among the artifacts." Dr. Crane, regaining some composure, pointed to the workbench. "The phonograph. Maybe it's connected. These old estates often have interconnected traps from smuggling days." Victor snorted, though his voice wavered. "Smugglers. This feels more like a tomb. If we're stuck here, we'll suffocate before dawn." "Enough defeatism," Lady Eleanor snapped, her voice echoing sharply. "Mr. Holmes, you led us here. Get us out." Holmes ignored the barb, his gaze fixed on the network of brass tubes snaking into the walls. "These tubes carry sound and perhaps air. If they link to the surface, they might offer a way to signal for help. Giles is still above. He could hear us." Sir Reginald nodded eagerly. "Giles has been with us for years, loyal to a fault." "Loyalty is a mask somewhere likely," Holmes murmured, but he approached the phonograph, turning its crank. The device whirred to life, and he spoke into the mouthpiece. "Giles, if you hear this, the chamber beneath the chapel has sealed. Fetch tools, a crowbar, ropes. Hurry." The words echoed through the tubes, distorted but audible. We waited in tense silence, the lantern's flame flickering as oxygen thinned. Clara leaned against me, her breathing shallow. "Dr. Watson, do you think the altar is punishing us?" "Nonsense," I replied, though doubt gnawed at me. "This is human malice, not mysticism." Minutes stretched like hours, until a faint scraping sounded from above, the stone slab shifting slightly, then grinding open with a rush of fresh air. Giles' face appeared in the gap, pale and sweating, a crowbar in hand. "Sir," I heard the voice like a ghost in the walls, pulled the lever in the chapel altar. We clambered out, gasping the cooler air of the tunnel. Holmes clasped Giles' shoulder briefly. "Well done. But tell me, did anyone else know of this lever?" Giles shook his head. "Only Sir Reginald and I, sir. It's an old escape mechanism." Holmes's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing as we retraced our steps to the chapel. The household gathered there, the moonlight now paling as dawn approached. "The trap was set," Holmes announced, "but not sprung randomly. The riddle warned of silence the heart or face the wrath. Someone activated it after we entered." Accusations flew. Victor eyed Dr. Crane suspiciously. "You were last in line, archaeologist. Convenient for you to lag behind." Crane sputtered. "Absurd. I was examining the tubes. Why would I trap myself?" Lady Eleanor stepped forward, her expression calculating, perhaps to feign innocence. "Your obsession with the altar is suspect." Clara's voice cut through, soft but firm. "Stop this. Mary's journal. She mentioned a shadowy figures forcing her, tall, cloaked. It could be anyone." Holmes held up a hand for silence, producing a small object from his pocket, a button, brass and engraved with a serpent motif, found near the workbench. "Torn in a struggle perhaps, whose coat is missing one." Eyes darted to garments. Sir Reginald checked his cuff, paling. "Mine, but I haven't worn this coat since yesterday." "Convenient," Victor muttered. Before tensions escalated further, a low rumble shook the manor. Not thunder, but something subterranean, like stone grinding against stone. Dust sifted from the ceiling, and the chapel floor vibrated. "The Moors," Jael said, fear in his eyes. "The old mines beneath, they're unstable." Holmes' gaze sharpened. "Or another mechanism. The second Riddle's trap extends beyond the chamber." We rushed to the great hall, where windows overlooked the grounds. In the pre-dawn gloom, a section of the moor seemed to shift, a sinkhole forming, swallowing earth and heather. At its edge, glinting faintly, was an exposed stone archway, carved with serpents. "The keep," Dr. Crane breathed. "The riddle from the cavern, in shadows deep, where echoes sleep, the past's cold breath reveals the keep. The collapse has uncovered it." Excitement mingled with dread as Holmes led us outside, the chill wind whipping our coats. The sinkhole was shallow, revealing a buried entrance to what appeared to be an ancient barrow. Stone steps descended into darkness, the air emanating a cold metallic tang. "This is folly," Lady Eleanor protested. "The ground is unstable." "Yet the riddle beckons," Holmes replied, descending without hesitation, "and the killer expects us to follow or flee." Reluctantly we followed, lanterns in hand. The barrow widened into a vaulted chamber, its walls inscribed with runes and depictions of rituals, figures around an altar, serpents entwining gems. In the center stood the Singtalusite altar, a massive slab of the shifting gemstone, its surface veined with colors that danced in the light green, amber red like blood. Clara gasped, backing away. "It's real, and it feels alive." Dr. Crane approached reverently, his fingers tracing the surface. "Magnificent, the power source for the legends." But Holmes circled it warily, his eyes scanning for traps. "The second riddle was a lure to draw us here. Observe the edges, pressure plates, wired to collapse the ceiling if triggered." Victor laughed nervously. "So we look but don't touch. What's the point?" "The point," Holmes said, pointing to a fresh carving on the altar's side, "is this. Etched in the gemstone were new words: touch the heart, claim the prize, but one false step and all demise." A puzzle, the altar's surface was divided into tiles, each engraved with symbols, serpents, gems, runes. A combination lock, Holmes deduced, solve the sequence from the riddles or trigger the trap. Sir Reginald's eyes gleamed with greed. "The treasure, it must be beneath." As the group debated, I noticed a shadow detach from the chamber's edge, a cloaked figure, blade in hand, lunging toward Holmes. "Look out!" I shouted, drawing my revolver. Holmes dodged, the blade glancing off stone, and the figure fled into a side tunnel, but not before Victor tackled them, ripping the cloak. It was Dr. Crane, his spectacles askew, a wild look in his eyes. "You!" Sir Reginald exclaimed. Crane struggled, but Holmes pinned him. "The archaeologist with a secret agenda. You coerced Mary, carved the riddles, set the traps, all to claim the altar for yourself." Crane sneered. "It's priceless. The blackthorns squander it on superstition. I would have sold it, shared the wealth, but you interfered." Lady Eleanor shook her head. "Fool, there's no treasure, only curse." But as Holmes bound Crane, the altar hummed, a tile glowing. The trap wasn't over. Crane's struggle had activated something. Rocks began to fall, the chamber trembling. "Run!" Holmes yelled, dragging Crane as we fled up the steps. The barrow collapsed behind us, sealing the altar once more. Dawn broke as we emerged, the moor scarred, but silent. The second riddle's trap had closed, but questions lingered. Was Crane the only culprit? Chapter 8. Allies and Adversaries. The first rays of dawn pierced the mist-shrouded moors, casting a pale golden hue over the scarred earth where the barrow had collapsed. I, Dr. John Watson, stood amid the group, my revolver still drawn, as Sherlock Holmes secured Dr. Mortimer Crane's wrists with a length of rope scavenged from the manor's stables. Crane's spectacles hung crookedly on his nose, his scholarly facade shattered, revealing a man driven by avarice and desperation. The air was crisp, laced with the earthy scent of upturned soil, and the distant call of a raven seemed to mock our narrow escape. "You fool!" Crane spat, struggling against his bonds. "The altar is worth fortunes to museums collectors. I discovered its location through years of research. The Blackthorns were content to let it rot in legend." Sir Reginald Blackthorn's face was a mask of fury, his silver hair dishevelled from the night's ordeals. "Research? You mean theft and murder? Mary was innocent. You coerced her, then silenced her when she threatened to expose you." Crane laughed bitterly, his eyes darting to the sinkhole. "Mary was a tool, easily manipulated. The riddles were my design, drawn from the family archives I pilfered. I needed to stir the pot, force you all to reveal the final clues. But Holmes, you ruined everything." Holmes straightened, his expression impassive, though I detected a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Ruined or resolved? Your traps were clever. The phonograph whispers, the chamber seal, the pressure plates, but predictable. A scholar's mind lacks the criminal's instinct for improvisation." Lady Eleanor stepped forward, her high-necked gown muddied at the hem, her serpent brooch glinting in the dawn light. "Predictable or not, he's responsible for the chaos. But is he alone? Those riddles referenced family secrets only we would know." Victor Blackthorn, his reckless demeanour subdued by the night's events, nodded vigorously. "Ant's right. Crane couldn't have known about the hollow hearth or the chapel lever without inside help." Clara, pale and fragile, clung to my arm for support. "And the dreams," the whispers felt personal, like they knew my fears. Holmes paced around the group, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Allies and adversaries, indeed. Dr. Crane, you claim sole credit, but your actions suggest collaboration. The button from Sir Reginald's coat, planted to mislead, or evidence of complicity." Sir Reginald bristled. "Absurd! I hired Crane to study the estate, not suspect him of treachery." "Yet you benefited," Holmes countered. "Your return from abroad coincided with renewed interest in the altar. Financial ruin looms over Blackthorn Manor, debts from failed ventures. The treasure would salvage your legacy." Sir Reginald's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Holmes turned to Lady Eleanor. "And you, madam, a scholar yourself. Your brooch, andesite eyes in the serpent, a family heirloom, or a symbol of deeper involvement. You dismissed the legends, yet your knowledge of them is profound." Lady Eleanor's green eyes flashed. "I protect this family from folly. If I knew of the altar, I'd have destroyed it to end the curse." Victor snorted. "Protect? You've always coveted control, aunt. With uncle's debts, you'd inherit if he met misfortune." "Enough," Clara cried, her voice breaking. "We're tearing each other apart. That's what the Riddles want." Holmes nodded approvingly. "Precisely, Miss Clara. Division is the killer's weapon, but let us interrogate properly." He gestured to Giles, who had joined us with fresh ropes and a lantern. "Secure Crane in the study. We'll question him there." The manor loomed as we returned, its towers silhouetted against the rising sun. In the study, a room lined with bookshelves and a massive desk cluttered with maps and artifacts, Crane was seated, bound to a chair. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling like serpents in the air. "Start from the beginning," Holmes said, his tone commanding. "How did you learn of the altar?" Crane sighed, defeat settling over him. "From old journals I found in the library. They detailed the hiding in 1642. I cross-referenced with Druidic texts. The Andalusite was a scrying stone used for visions, but embedded within were real gems, diamonds, emeralds, worth a king's ransom." I leaned forward, and the murder's Mary's throat was cut with surgical precision. Crane's eyes flickered. "Not murder. Self-defense." She panicked, threatened to tell Sir Reginald. I reacted. "Liar," Victor interjected from the doorway. "You planned it all." Holmes raised a hand. "Perhaps, but the first riddle arrived before your reaction. You needed an accomplice to place the shards undetected." Crane smirked. "Accomplice? The manor has secrets, passages I mapped. I moved like a ghost." Lady Eleanor entered, holding a bundle of letters. "Ghosts don't write these." She thrust them at Holmes. "Found in Crane's quarters. Correspondence with a buyer in London, offering the altar for sale." Holmes scanned the letters. "Anonymous buyer. Are promising half up front. But the postmarks, recent, from Dartmoor Village, not London." Sir Reginald frowned. "A local. But who?" A commotion outside drew our attention. Giles burst in, breathless. "Sir, the stables. Someone's tampered with the carriage. The wheels are loose, as if to cause an accident." Holmes' eyes narrowed. Sabotage, to prevent escape or pursuit. Victor grabbed his coat. "I'll check the grounds. This isn't over." As Victor left, Clara whispered to me, "Dr. Watson, I fear for us all. The altar's curse feels real." I patted her hand reassuringly. "Holmes will uncover the truth." The interrogation continued, but Crane grew evasive, his answers laced with half-truths. Holmes paced, piecing together clues. The riddles evolve from summons to traps. The motive shifts, not just theft, but elimination of rivals. Lady Eleanor nodded slowly. "The heirs, if we all perish, who inherits?" Sir Reginald paled. "The estate reverts to a distant cousin, but he's dead. No, it would go to auction." "Or to the one survivor," Holmes mused. A scream pierced the air. Clara's. We rushed to the hall, finding her pointing at the floor. A new Andalusite shard lay there, etched with allies turn, adversaries burn, trust breaks where the serpent turns. Victor re-entered, muddied. "The moors are clear, but I found tracks leading to the village." Holmes examined the shard. Fresh placed moments ago. Crane couldn't have done it. Eyes turned suspiciously among the family. Allies and adversaries blurred, suspicions festering like wounds. Holmes smiled faintly. "The game deepens. We must divide to conquer. Watson with me to the village. The rest stay vigilant." As we departed, the manor's shadows seemed to lengthen, hiding betrayals yet to be revealed. The riddle's web tightened, and I wondered who among us would next feel the serpent strike. Chapter 9. The Hidden Chamber. The morning mist clung to the moors like a shroud as Sherlock Holmes and I, Dr. John Watson, set out for Dartmoor Village, following the tracks Victor had discovered. The air was sharp with the scent of wet earth and heather, and the distant silhouette of Blackthorn Manor loomed behind us, its towers piercing the fog like accusing fingers. Holmes moved with purpose, his eyes scanning the ground, where faint impressions of boots, square-heeled, like those we'd seen upon arrival, led toward the village. My revolver weighed heavily in my coat, a reminder of the unseen threat that stalked us. "These tracks are deliberate," Holmes said, crouching to examine a particularly clear print, made to be followed, yet not too obvious. "Our adversary is baiting us, Watson." "Baiting us to what?" I asked, my breath visible in the chill air. "The village is hardly a den of criminals." "Every village hides secrets," he replied, straightening, "and this one sent letters to Crane, promising wealth for the altar. We seek not just a person, but a motive." The village was a cluster of stone cottages huddled around a weathered inn, the Black Serpent, its sign depicting a coiled snake with Andalacite-like eyes. The streets were quiet, save for a few early risers, a baker hauling flour, a milkmaid with her cart, who eyed us warily. Holmes led us to the post office, a squat building with a creaking door. The postmaster, a grizzled man named Harrow, squinted at us through thick spectacles. "Letters to Blackthorn Manor," Harrow repeated, scratching his beard. "Aye, plenty go up there. But one came through last week, no return address, posted local, odd things sealed with a serpent stamp, like the old Blackthorn crest." Holmes' eyes gleamed, and the recipient, "Dr. Crane, care of the manor," Harrow said. I don't set pry, but it felt heavy, like it held more than paper. Holmes thanked him and stepped outside, his gaze sweeping the village, a local conspirator. Then, someone with knowledge of the Manor Scepter's secrets, bold enough to correspond with Crane. Before I could respond, a boy darted from an alley, pressing a note into Holmes' hand before vanishing into the fog. Holmes unfolded it, a scrap of paper, not Andalacite, but bearing another riddle. "The serpent's lair lies near, yet far seek the hollow where shadows are." "Another clue," I said, frustration creeping in. "But where?" "The manor set's riddled with passages." Holmes pocketed the note, his expression unreadable. "The village knows more than it tells. And come, Watson." We return to the manor. The tracks loop back. Our quarry is closer than we thought. We retraced our steps. The moor sits eerie silence, broken only by the crunch of gravel. Back at Blackthorn Manor, the household was in disarray. Giles met us at the door, his face ashen. "Mr. Holmes, there's been another incident. Lady Eleanor found something in the West Wing." We hurried to a dusty corridor lined with locked rooms, where Lady Eleanor stood before an open door, her face pale but composed. "I was searching for old records," she said, "when I found this room unlocked, though it shouldn't set be." Inside was a small chamber, its walls bare save for a single tapestry depicting a serpent coiled around an Andalusite altar. Beneath it, a trap-door gaped open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. A faint glow emanated from below, green and amber, shifting like the gemstone itself. "The hollow where shadows are," Holmes murmured, quoting the riddle. "Lady Eleanor, who else knew of this room?" "No one," she said sharply. "It was my father's study, sealed after his death. I thought it empty." Holmes descended the stairs, lantern in hand, and I followed, the others crowding behind. The staircase ended in a subterranean chamber, smaller than the barrow, but no less imposing. At its center stood the true Andalacite altar, Unlike the one in the collapsed barrow, this was pristine, its surface a mosaic of gemstone tiles that shimmered with otherworldly hues. Carved into its base was another riddle. The heart of stone holds light within, press true or shadows win. Victor, who had joined us, whistled low. That sits it, the real altar. Look at those gems. We sit, rich. Clara shrank back, her voice trembling. It's Stet's watching us. Can Stet's you feel it? Sir Reginald gripped her shoulder. It sits just stone, Clara. But the treasure must be here. Dr. Crane, still bound and escorted by Giles, sneered from the rear. Fools! The altar sits power isn't sit wealth, it sits control. Why do you think I risked everything? Holmes ignored them, circling the altar, a puzzle like the last. The tiles are a sequence, press the wrong ones, and we trigger another trap. He pointed to symbols etched around the altar, serpents, stars, and runes, each glowing faintly. I examined the tiles, my medical eye, noting their precision. These look like they stead to depress, like keys on a piano. But which order? Holmes studied the riddle again, then the tapestry above, which showed a serpent with 7 stars in its coils. 7 presses, corresponding to the stars. The sequence must align with the riddle's sect themes: serpent, shadow, heart. He pressed a tile, marked with a serpent's head. A low hum filled the chamber, and a green glow intensified. He pressed another, a star, and the hum grew louder, amber light joining the green. The group watched, breathless, as he methodically pressed 5 more tiles, following a pattern only he could discern. The altar vibrated, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing a cache of glittering gems, diamonds, emeralds, and more, Andalusite, polished to brilliance. Sir Reginald gasped. The treasure, it sets real. But Holmes' eyes were on the altar's base, where a new carving appeared as if by magic. Light revealed, but truth concealed. One among you betrays the field. Clara screamed, pointing to the floor. A shadow moved, not cast by any of us, but a figure, cloaked, slipping through a side passage that had opened with the panel. Victor lunged after it, but Holmes stayed him with a sharp gesture. Let them go, Holmes said. They sept shown their hand. This altar was a distraction. The real prize is the betrayer. Lady Eleanor Sitt's voice was icy. You mean one of us triggered that passage? Precisely, Holmes said. The altar sept's mechanism required a remote signal. Someone here pressed a device, perhaps a ring or pendant, to open the escape route. All eyes turned to Lady Eleanor Stupp's brooch, its serpent eyes glinting. She stepped back, indignant. You dare accuse me? Not yet, Holmes said, his smile enigmatic, but the shadows are parting. Watson, secure the gems. We return to the study to unravel this betrayal. As we ascended, the altar's glow faded, but the weight of suspicion grew heavier. The hidden chamber had revealed its treasure, but the true riddle, the identity of the cloaked figure, remained, lurking just beyond our grasp. Chapter 10. Betrayals in the Fog. The fog had thickened over Blackthorn Manor, wrapping the estate in a grey veil that muffled sound and blurred the edges of reality. Dr. John Watson carried the small cache of gems from the hidden chamber, their weight in my coat pocket, a stark contrast to the intangible dread that clung to our group. Sherlock Holmes led us back to the study, his pace brisk, his eyes darting to every shadow, as if expecting the cloaked figure to emerge once more. Behind us, Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Victor, Clara, and Giles followed, their faces a mix of awe, suspicion, and exhaustion. Crane, still bound and under Giles' watchful eye, trudged silently, his earlier defiance replaced by a sullen resignation. The study's heavy oak door creaked as we entered, the room's air stale with the scent of old books and wax. Holmes lit additional lamps, their warm glow pushing back the gloom, but not the tension. He placed the Fender-Lucite shard from the altar on the desk, its latest riddle light revealed, but truth concealed. One among you betrays the field etched in sharp relief. The gems, glittering like captured stars, were set beside it, drawing covetous glances from Sir Reginald and Victor. Holmes stood before the group, his presence commanding silence. "The altar has yielded its treasure," he began, "but not its truth." The cloaked figure who fled the chamber activated a hidden mechanism, revealing a passage only they could access. This was no accident. It was betrayal, planned and executed with precision. Lady Eleanor Stett's voice was sharp, her serpent brooch catching the lamplight. "You keep hinting at accusations, Mr. Holmes. If you suspect me, say it plainly." Holmes' gaze was steady. "Your brooch, Lady Eleanor, is a curious artifact, Andalusite eyes, a serpent design, and heavy enough to conceal a mechanism. May I examine it?" Her hand flew to the brooch, her expression defiant. "This is a family heirloom, not a toy for your theories." But under Holmes' unrelenting stare, she unclasped it and handed it over, her fingers trembling slightly. Holmes turned the brooch over, his fingers probing its edges. A faint click sounded, and a small compartment sprang open, revealing a tiny brass lever. "A signaling device," he said, holding it up, capable of triggering a remote mechanism, like the passage in the chamber. Gasps rippled through the room. Victor stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "So it was you, Aunt. You've been playing us all, setting traps, stirring up this curse, nonsense to scare us off." Lady Eleanor Stett's face flushed with indignation. "Preposterous. I've worn this brooch for years. It's Stett's a keepsake, nothing more. I didn't Stett even know it had a compartment." Sir Reginald Stett's voice trembled with betrayal. "Eleanor, if you been manipulating this for the treasure or control of the estate—" "Enough," Clara interjected, her voice surprisingly firm. We stir turning on each other again. "Mr. Holmes, what does the riddle mean? Tad's one among you betrays the field Tadsby." Holmes set the brooch down, his eyes scanning the group. "The thief field tits is likely the more the estate itself. The betrayal is not just against the family, but against the legacy of the altar. Someone seeks to claim it, not for wealth, but for power, or to ensure no one else does." Dr. Crane, silent and now, laughed hoarsely. "You set all blind. The altar set's power isn't set in gems, it sets in fear. Control the riddles, control the family. I tried to exploit it, but someone else has been pulling strings longer than I." Holmes nodded, as if expecting this. "You were a pawn, Crane, not the mastermind. Your buyer in the village, a local, you claimed. Yet the postmaster confirmed the letters were sent from here, suggesting an insider orchestrated the deal." Victor Sex's scowl deepened. "Then it's one of us. But who? Clara Sex too timid, Uncle Sex too desperate, and I been out in the open." Holmes raised a hand for silence, his attention drawn to a faint noise. A creak from the corridor. "Giles," he said sharply, "check the hall." The butler obeyed, returning moments later, his face pale. "The front door sits ajar, sir, and there sits fog inside, like it sits seeping through the walls." Holmes strode to the door, peering into the corridor. The fog had indeed infiltrated the manor, curling like tendrils across the floor, reducing visibility to mere feet. "Unnatural," he murmured. "A chemical fog, perhaps sulfur and glycerin, used in theatrical effects to obscure movement." Yow. I gripped my revolver tighter. "You mean someone sits creating this to cover their tracks?" "Precisely," Holmes said, stepping into the haze. "Stay close, Watson. The betrayer is moving." We ventured into the fog, the group trailing reluctantly. The manor's corridors, already labyrinthine, became a maze of shifting shadows. Our footsteps echoed, impossible to pinpoint, and the air grew acrid, stinging my eyes. Holmes moved with uncanny certainty, following some invisible trail, perhaps a scent or the faintest disturbance in the fog. A sudden clatter from the great hall drew us forward. We emerged to find a toppled candelabrum, its wax pooling on the floor. Beside it lay another Andalusite shard, freshly carved. "In fog's embrace the traitor's face, seek the mirror where truths displace." "The Hall of Mirrors," Sir Reginald said, his voice low. "An old room, used for banquets in my grandfather Sept's time. It sets in the west wing." We navigated through the fog, the manor's oppressive silence broken only by our breaths and the occasional creak of wood. The Hall of Mirrors was a cavernous chamber, its walls lined with tarnished, floor-to-ceiling mirrors that reflected our distorted figures in the flickering lamplight. The fog was thinner here, but the reflections created a disorienting kaleidoscope of faces and shadows. Holmes examined the shard, then the mirrors. "The riddle suggests a revelation, a literal reflection of the traitor." He tapped a mirror, its surface rippling slightly. "This is no ordinary glass, a two-way mirror concealing a passage." He pressed a panel beside it, and the mirror swung open, revealing a narrow tunnel. A faint light glowed at its end, accompanied by the soft clink of metal. Holmes signaled for silence, drawing his own pistol, a rare precaution. We crept forward, the tunnel opening into a small room filled with tools, maps, and a portable chemical apparatus, vials of sulfur and glycerin, confirming the fog's artificial origin. In the center stood a figure, cloaked but unmasked. Giles the butler, his gaunt face illuminated by a lantern. He held a chisel and an Andalusite shard, carving a new riddle. He froze as we entered, his eyes wide with panic. "Giles," Sir Reginald exclaimed, "you after all these years?" Holmes stepped forward, his pistol steady. "Loyalty, it seems, has its limits. You step in orchestrating the riddles, using Crane as a front. Why?" Giles dropped the chisel, his shoulders sagging. "For the manor," he whispered. "The Blackthorns are bankrupt. Sir Reginald's debts would sell the estate to strangers. I found the altar's secrets in the archives, used them to scare off buyers, to keep the family here. The fog, the riddles, it was to protect our legacy." Lady Eleanor Sitt's voice was cold. "Protect? You killed Mary." Giles shook his head. "That was Cranesip's doing. I only guided him, fed him the riddles to expose his greed." Holmes' Deck's expression darkened, and the cloaked figure in the chamber. Giles hesitated, then pointed to a cloak on the floor. "A disguise, to move unseen. I meant no harm, only to save the manor." But as Holmes bound him, I noticed a flicker in his eyes, a lie, or fear of something greater. The fog began to clear, but the mirrors reflected a truth, still obscured. Betrayals layered upon betrayals, and I sensed the serpent's coils tightening around us all. Chapter 11. The Pursuit Through the Labyrinth. The hall of mirrors cast fractured reflections of our group as we stood over Giles, his wrists now bound by Holmes' deft hands. The fog had begun to dissipate, leaving a damp chill that clung to the air of Blackthorn Manor. Doctor John Watson felt the weight of my revolver in my pocket, its presence a small comfort against the mounting revelations. Sherlock Holmes' face was a mask of concentration, his eyes darting between Giles and the hidden room's contents, tools, vials, and half-carved andesite shards that spoke of a meticulously planned deception. Giles' Sist confession hung heavy, but his claim of protecting the manor rang hollow. Holmes crouched before him, his voice low and probing. You orchestrated the riddles, the fog, the traps, yet you deny Mary Sidge's murder. If not you, then who else moves through these walls unseen? Giles' set gaunt face twitched, his eyes flickering toward the tunnel-set's dark mouth. I told you, Crane acted alone in that. I only guided the chaos. Someone else had to finish what I started. Lady Eleanor Sist's voice cut through, sharp as a blade. Finish, you Sis torn this family apart, Giles. If their Sist's another traitor, name them. Before Giles could respond, a faint clatter echoed from the tunnel, a metallic sound, like a tool dropped in haste. Holmes sprang to his feet, his pistol drawn. Watson, with me. The rest, stay with Giles and Crane. Guard the gems. I followed Holmes into the narrow passage, the lantern's light barely piercing the oppressive darkness. The tunnel twisted deeper into the manor's foundations, its walls slick with condensation and etched with ancient carvings, serpents, stars and runes that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. The air grew colder, the scent of damp stone mingling with something acrid, like burnt chemicals. Holmes moved like a hound on the scent, his steps silent but swift. The labyrinth beneath this manor is no accident, he said, his voice a whisper. Designed centuries ago, likely for smuggling or escape. Our quarry knows its paths intimately. The clatter came again. Closer now, followed by the scuff of boots. We rounded a corner to glimpse a figure, cloaked as before, but smaller than Giles, their movements agile. They vanished into a side passage, the glint of a blade catching the lantern's glow. After them, Holmes hissed, breaking into a run. I followed, my heart pounding as we navigated the maze. The tunnel branched repeatedly, each fork marked by cryptic symbols that seemed to taunt us. Holmes paused at one, tracing a serpent carving. These are guides for those who know the code. The riddles are not just clues, they're a map. We pressed on, the pursuit relentless. The figure was fast, but Holmes' instincts were faster, anticipating their turns. At last, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling vaulted with stalactites, its floor littered with debris, broken pottery, rusted tools, and fragments of andesite. In the center stood a stone pillar, etched with another riddle. Through the labyrinth's twist, the truth is near. Face the serpent's eye to conquer fear. The figure stood before the pillar, their cloak falling to reveal Clara Blackthorne, her pale face streaked with dirt, her blue eyes wild. In her hand was a dagger, its blade stained with dried blood. She froze, staring at us like a cornered animal. "Clara," I gasped, lowering my revolver. "What are you doing here?" Holmes stepped forward, his pistol steady. "Miss Blackthorne, the game is up. Drop the dagger and explain yourself." Clara's hands trembled, but she held the weapon tightly. "I had to," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The altar, it speaks to me. In my dreams, it demands blood to end the curse. Mary, she was going to ruin everything. Tell everyone the altar was a myth to save us. But it's real, Mr. Holmes. It's alive." Holmes' eyes narrowed, his tone calm but unyielding. "The altar is stone, Clara. The voices are manipulations. Giles sits phonograph, Crane sits greed, and perhaps another hand guiding you. Why the dagger? Who else have you targeted?" Tears streamed down her face. "No one else. I swear only Mary. When she threatened to destroy the altar, I thought, if I followed the riddles, I could save the family, keep the manor ours." Holmes lowered his pistol slightly, studying her. "You placed the shards, activated the passages, but the dreams, someone fed them to you, exploiting your fears. Who?" Clara shook her head, sinking to her knees. "I don't know. The whispers, they felt like my own thoughts, but not. I found notes in my room, telling me what to do, where to go." Holmes knelt beside her, retrieving the dagger gently. "Show me the notes." She fumbled in her pocket, producing crumpled papers, hastily scrawled instructions, unsigned, with phrases echoing the riddles: "Strike the heart, save the bloodline." Holmes scanned them, his expression darkening. "These are in a different hand than Giles' journal or Crane's letters. A third player, orchestrating from the shadows." A sudden tremor shook the chamber, dust sifting from the ceiling. The pillar's riddle glowed faintly, and a grinding sound echoed, a hidden door sliding open in the wall, revealing another passage. Holmes grabbed the lantern, pulling Clara to her feet. "Watson, we must move. The labyrinth is unstable, and our true adversary is still free." We hurried through the new passage, Clara stumbling between us. The tunnel sloped upward, emerging into the manor's west wing, near the Hall of Mirrors. The household awaited us, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion as they saw Clara dishevelled and weeping. Victor lunged forward. "Clara, you killed Mary." Lady Eleanor Sist's voice was icy. "She tests a child, manipulated, but by whom?" Holmes handed Clara to Sir Reginald, who embraced her protectively. "We have two culprits, Giles and Crane, but a mastermind remains." The notes in Clara Sipp's possession suggest someone with intimate knowledge of the family Sipp's fears, someone who turned kin against kin. Sir Reginald Stipp's voice trembled. "Then it Stipp's one of us, or an outsider." Holmes' gaze swept the group. "The labyrinth has revealed much, but not all. The serpent's eye, the final clue, points to a confrontation." We return to the study. The truth is close, but so is danger. As we moved, Clara's sobs echoed behind us, and the manor's walls seemed to close in, the labyrinth's twists mirroring the tangled lies we had yet to unravel. The pursuit had caught one betrayer, but the serpent's coils held tighter still. Chapter 12. Pieces of the Puzzle. The study of Blackthorn Manor was a fortress of shadows, its lamplight casting jagged patterns across the bookshelves and the heavy desk where the Andalusite shards and stolen gems lay. Dr. John Watson stood near the door, my revolver at the ready as the weight of the night's revelations pressed upon us. Sherlock Holmes paced before the assembled household, Sir Reginald, Lady Eleanor, Victor, Clara, and Giles, with Dr. Crane still bound in a corner, his sullen gaze fixed on the floor. Clara, pale and trembling, sat beside her uncle, her confession of Mary's death hanging like a spectre over the room. Holmes held the latest Andalusite shard, its riddle light revealed, but truth concealed. One among you betrays the field etched in sharp relief. The pieces are falling into place, he said, his voice steady but laced with an edge of urgency. We have uncovered layers of deceit. Crane's greed, Giles' misguided loyalty, Clara's manipulated desperation. Yet the puppet master remains hidden, orchestrating this chaos with surgical precision. Lady Eleanor sits, green eyes flashed, her posture rigid. You theft accused nearly everyone, Mr. Holmes. If there sits another traitor, name them. I tire of this game. Holmes' smile was thin, almost predatory. Patience, Lady Eleanor. The game ends when the truth is laid bare. Let us assemble the puzzle. He spread the collected shards on the desk, their riddles forming a sequence. Seek the altar where shadows fall. The altar sees the serpent strikes, beneath the serpent's gaze. In shadows deep, midnight whispers touch the heart, light revealed. Each riddle, Holmes continued, builds toward a purpose, not just to locate the altar, but to manipulate this family into destroying itself. The clues were designed to incite suspicion, to pit heir against heir. Victor leaned against the wall, his usual bravado dimmed. So what? Someone wants the estate, the gems, why not just take them? Holmes turned to him, his gaze piercing, because the prize is not merely wealth, but control. The altar's legend promises power, mythical or psychological. Someone seeks to wield it, or ensure no one does. He picked up Clara's crumpled notes, their scrawled instructions echoing the riddles. These were planted to exploit Clara's fears, driving her to act against Mary. The handwriting is distinct, neither Crane's nor Giles'. Sir Reginald Sitt's voice was hoarse. Then who? A stranger in our midst? Holmes's eyes flicked to the desk, where a map of the manor lay, marked with the labyrinth Sitter's passages. Not a stranger. Someone intimate with Blackthorn Manor Sit's secrets, its tunnels, its mechanisms, its history. Someone who knew the altar Sit's location and used it to weave this web. I stepped forward, my medical instincts stirred. Holmes, the precision of Mary Sebas' wound suggests skill, possibly surgical. Could it be someone outside the family, posing as a guest or servant? Holmes nodded, his fingers drumming on the desk. A possibility, Watson. But consider the timing. The riddles began when Sir Reginald returned, accompanied by Crane. The manor Sit's isolation limits outsiders. The postmaster Sit's letters sent locally point to an insider or someone with access. Lady Eleanor crossed her arms, her serpent brooch glinting. You examined my brooch, Mr. Holmes, and found a mechanism. If I were the mastermind, why would I carry evidence? Exactly why it clears you, partially, Holmes replied. The brooch was a distraction, meant to cast suspicion. The true culprit is subtler. He turned to Giles, whose gaunt face was slick with sweat. You claim to protect the manor, yet you knew of the phonograph and passages. Did you ever see another figure in the tunnels? Giles hesitated, his eyes darting to Clara, then away. Once a shadow, moving fast. I thought it was Crane, but it was smaller. Clara gasped, her hands clasping her Uncle Sip's arm. The dreams, I saw a figure too in the shadows. They left the notes, told me to act or the family would fall. Holmes' gaze sharpened, and he strode to the map, tracing a passage that looped from the west wing to the village. The tracks we followed, square-heeled boots, leading to and from the manor. They weren't Crane's or Giles. They belonged to our shadow, who moves freely between estate and village. You may falls. A sudden crash shattered the tension, a window in the study bursting inward, glass scattering across the floor. A gust of fog-laden air swept in, carrying a new Andalusite shard that skittered across the desk. Its carving read, "The puzzle fits the serpent's done, face the truth when shadows run." Victor swore, drawing a knife from his belt. "They sit here taunting us." Holmes seized the shard, his eyes blazing. "Not taunting, panicking. The mastermind knows we sat close. Watson, check the grounds." I rushed outside with Victor, the fog thicker now, curling around the manor like a living thing. Footprints, square-heeled, led toward the stables where the sabotaged carriage stood. A figure darted into the mist, their silhouette fleeting but unmistakable, small, agile, cloaked. I fired a warning shot into the air, the crack echoing across the moors. "Stop!" I shouted, but they vanished into a copse of yew trees. Victor sprinted after, but I called him back. "It sits a lure," Holmes warned us. We returned to the study, where Holmes was interrogating Crane anew. "Your buyer," he pressed. "Describe them." Crane Sit's lips curled. "Never met them. Notes only left at the inn. Signed Serpent Sit's keeper. Sit's promised half the profits if I delivered the altar." Holmes turned to the group, his voice rising. "The Serpent Sit's keeper is among us, or was. The riddles, the traps, the murder, all designed to eliminate threats to their control. Clara was a pawn, Crane a tool, Giles a decoy. The true betrayer hides in plain sight." Lady Eleanor Sid's voice trembled with rage. "Then search the manor, tear it apart." Holmes shook his head. "No need. The final clue, face the truth when shadows run Nesta, points to a confrontation. They still come to us, driven by desperation." As if on cue, a low rumble shook the manor, not from the moors but within, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, approaching from the hall. The door swung open, revealing a figure in a cloak, face obscured, holding a lantern and a blade. The room froze, and Holmes stepped forward, his pistol raised. "Unmask yourself," he commanded. "The puzzle is complete." The figure hesitated, then lowered the hood, revealing a face none expected, a woman elderly, with sharp features and eyes like the Andalusite altar, shifting in the light. "Mrs. Harrow," I gasped, recognizing the postmaster's wife from the village. Holmes's smile was grim. "The Serpent Sit's keeper, widow of a Blackthorn cousin, keeper of the Manor Sit's secrets. You Sits played a long game, madam." Mrs. Harrow Sit's voice was steady, unrepentant. "The altar is mine, by right. The Blackthorns squandered it. I stirred the riddles to reclaim what was stolen from my line." The pieces clicked. Her access, her knowledge, her manipulation. The puzzle was nearly whole, but the final confrontation loomed, the serpent's coils tightening for one last strike. Chapter 13. The final twist revealed. The study of Blackthorn Manor was a crucible of tension, its lamplight flickering as if recoiling from the figure before us. Mrs. Harrow, the postmaster's widow, stood defiant, her weathered face illuminated by the lantern she held, her eyes glinting with the same shifting hues as the Andalusite altar. Her cloak, tattered at the edges, bore the faint outline of square-heeled boots, tying her to the tracks Holmes and I had followed across the moors. I, Dr. John Watson, gripped my revolver, my pulse quickening as the weight of her revelation settled over the room. Sherlock Holmes stood poised, his pistol levelled, his expression a blend of triumph and vigilance. "Mrs. Harrow," Holmes said, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "you are the serpent's keeper, the architect of this deadly charade. You manipulated Crane, coerced Giles, and preyed on Clara's fears to fracture the Blackthorn family. But why claim the altar now, after decades in the shadows?" Mrs. Harrow's lips curled into a bitter smile, her blade glinting as she gestured toward the desk where the andalusite shards and gems lay. "The altar was never about wealth, Mr. Holmes. It's power control over the Blackthorn legacy. My husband was a Blackthorn, a cousin cast out for defying the family's greed. When he died, I swore to reclaim what was ours, to restore our name." Sir Reginald Stepp's face was ashen, his voice trembling. "You stir, Margaret, cousin Edward Stepp's widow. You were banished after the scandal, accused of theft." "Theft?" she spat, her eyes blazing. "I took nothing but what was promised. A share of the altar Sepp's secrets. Your grandfather hid it, fearing its power. But I found the journals, the passages, the riddles. I waited, planned, and used your return to stir the pot." Lady Eleanor stepped forward, her serpent brooch glinting accusingly. "You killed Mary, stirred Clara Sitt's dreams, set traps, you Citra monster." Mrs. Harrow Sitt's laugh was cold, echoing in the study. "Mary was Crane Sipp's doing, not mine. I merely encouraged his greed. Clara Sipp's dreams were fueled by notes and whispers. Yes, but she acted of her own will. The altar Sipp's curse is real to those who believe it." Clara, clinging to Sir Reginald, sobbed. "You made me think I was saving us. You used me." Holmes's gaze never wavered. A mastermind, indeed. The phonograph in the tunnels, the chemical fog, the riddles carved to mimic ancient script, all your work. But the button from Sir Reginald Sipp's coat, the tracks to the village, sloppy errors for one so meticulous. Mrs. Harrow Sitt's smile faltered. "Errors or distractions? You followed the tracks I left, didn't stet you. Kept you chasing shadows while I moved the pieces." Victor, his knife still in hand, growled. "Pieces? You nearly buried us in that barrow. What sits your end game? Kill us all." Holmes raised a hand for silence, his eyes narrowing. "No, Victor. Her endgame was subtler, to destabilize the family, ensure the estate sits auction, and claim the altar when the manor fell to ruin. But there sits a flaw in your plan, Mrs. Harrow." She tilted her head, defiant. "And what is that, detective?" Holmes stepped closer, his pistol unwavering. "You Stet's not alone. The riddle Stet's complexity, the timing of the traps too precise for one person, even one as cunning as you. Another hand guided you, someone within this room." A collective gasp rippled through the group. I scanned their faces. Sir Reginald's shock, Lady Eleanor's indignation, Victor's suspicion, Clara's fear, Giles' guilt, Crane's sullen silence. Holmes' words hung like a noose, tightening the tension. "Impossible," Mrs. Harrow said, but her voice wavered, her eyes flicking to the group. "I worked alone. The Blackthorns were my pawns." Holmes shook his head, producing the crumpled notes from Clara's possession. "These instructions, your handwriting, yes, but the phrasing mirrors another's. The serpent motif, the precise cuts in Mary's throat, the sabotage of the carriage, all point to a second mind, one with intimate knowledge of the manor and its mechanisms. He turned abruptly, his gaze locking onto Lady Eleanor. "You, madam. Your brooch was no mere heirloom. It was a signal, yes, but also a badge of complicity. You knew the passages, the altar sits history. You fed Mrs. Harrow the family secrets, didn't you?" Lady Eleanor sits face drained of colour, her hand clutching the desk. "This is outrageous. I set forth to protect this family from the altar sit's curse." "Protect?" Holmes said, his voice icy. "Or control? You dismissed the legends, yet your scholarship gave you access to the archives. You planted the button to implicate Sir Reginald, stirred Clara's fears to distract us. Your alliance with Mrs. Harrow was to eliminate rivals, ensuring you'd inherit the estate when the others fell." Victor lunged toward his aunt, but I restrained him. "Aunt Eleanor, you let Mary die." Lady Eleanor's composure cracked, her voice rising. "I had no choice. The manor was crumbling. Reginald's 6 debts suffocating us. Margaret, Mrs. Harrow, offered a way out. We 6 share the altar 6 gems, sell them abroad. Mary was collateral." Clara's scream pierced the air. "You used me, both of you." Sir Reginald staggered, clutching his chest. "Eleanor, my own sister." Holmes lowered his pistol, his voice calm but relentless. "The final twist, 2 serpents, entwined, Mrs. Harrow, the outsider, and Lady Eleanor, the insider, weaving a tapestry of betrayal. The riddles were your joint creation, each playing your part, Harrow in the shadows, Eleanor in the light. We..." Mrs. Harrow snarled, raising her blade, but Holmes was faster, disarming her with a swift motion. I tackled Lady Eleanor as she tried to flee, pinning her against the desk. The room erupted in chaos. Clara's sobs, Victor's curses, Sir Reginald's anguished cries. Holmes bound the 2 women, his expression grim. "The puzzle is complete. The altar sitter's power was a myth, but its legend fueled greed and treachery. Mary died for your ambitions, and Clara nearly followed." As we secured the culprits, the study 6 door burst open, revealing the village constable summoned by Giles during the chaos. "Mr. Holmes," he said, breathless, "we got your message from the inn." Holmes nodded. "Take them. Murder, conspiracy, and attempted theft. The evidence is here. Shards, notes, and the altar 6 gems." As the constable led Mrs. Harrow and Lady Eleanor away, their defiant glares faded into resignation. The manor seemed to exhale, its oppressive weight lifting slightly. But the scars of betrayal lingered, etched in the faces of the surviving blackthorns. Holmes turned to me, his eyes weary but satisfied. "Or the serpent 6 coils are broken, Watson. But the truth, as always, cuts deeper than the legend." Chapter 14. Resolution and Reflections. The dawn broke over Blackthorn Manor, its pale light filtering through the fog to cast a sombre glow on the weathered stone. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of heather and the lingering bitterness of betrayal. I, Dr. John Watson, stood beside Sherlock Holmes in the great hall, where the remnants of the Blackthorn family, Sir Reginald, Victor, and Clara, gathered in a fragile silence. The Andalusite shards, the glittering gems, and the damning notes lay on the oak table, evidence of a conspiracy that had nearly torn them apart. Mrs. Harrow and Lady Eleanor were gone, taken by the village constable to face justice for their crimes, leaving the manor quieter, but not at peace. Holmes surveyed the room, his sharp eyes softened by a rare trace of melancholy. "The riddle of the Andalusite altar is solved," he said, his voice steady but low. "Not a curse, but a catalyst, exposing greed, fear, and the fragility of trust. The serpent's coils were woven by human hands, not fate." Sir Reginald, his silver hair dishevelled, sank into a chair, his face etched with grief. "My sister, my family, torn apart by a myth I fed with my desperation. If I hadn't Set returned, chasing the altar Set's promise." "You cannot rewrite the past," Holmes interrupted, not unkindly. "Your debts drove you, but Mrs. Harrow and Lady Eleanor chose their path. Mary Sipp's death lies on their hands, and Clara Sipp's actions were coerced by their manipulation." Clara, her eyes red from crying, clutched her Uncle Sipp's hand. "I killed Mary. I thought I was saving us. Can I ever be forgiven?" I stepped forward, my medical instincts urging comfort. "Clara, you were a pawn in their game, driven by fear. The law may show leniency, and time will heal your heart." Victor, leaning against the wall, his usual bravado replaced by a weary scowl, shook his head. "Leniency. This manor sits cursed, not by stones but by us. I sit leaving. Let the estate rot." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "A pragmatic choice, Victor, but consider this: the altar Sept's gems, though tainted by blood, could clear your Uncle Sept's debts. The manor might yet be saved, if you choose to stay." Sir Reginald looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "The gems enough to rebuild?" "More than enough," Holmes replied, gesturing to the cash on the table. "But wealth demands wisdom. The Blackthorns must decide their legacy, rebuild, or let the past bury you." The family fell silent, each grappling with the weight of their choices. Holmes turned to me, his expression shifting to one of quiet reflection. "Watson, every case reveals the human soul, its brilliance and its darkness. This one cut deeper than most." We stepped outside, the moor stretching before us, its scars from the collapsed barrow a reminder of the night's chaos. The raven we'd seen upon arrival, perched on a gatepost, its eyes glinting as if it knew the manor's secrets. Holmes lit his pipe, the smoke curling into the dawn air. "What now, Holmes?" I asked, feeling the exhaustion of the case settle into my bones. "Back to Baker Street." He exhaled slowly, his gaze distant. "To London, yes, but not to rest. The world is full of riddles, Watson, and I am loath to let them pass unsolved. This case reminds us, truth is a gem with many facets, shifting in the light. We must always seek the angle that reveals it." As we walked toward the waiting carriage, the manor behind us seemed less a spectre, more a monument to human folly. The Blackthorns would face their future, Clara to seek redemption, Victor to choose his path, Sir Reginald to rebuild or surrender. The altar's shadow had lifted, but its lessons lingered. Holmes paused, glancing back. "The serpent sleeps, Watson, for now." The tale of Sherlock Holmes and the riddle of the Andalusite altar has reached its end, but the echoes of its mysteries linger, much like the fog over Dartmoor's moors. Holmes and Watson have unravelled a web of deceit, exposing the dark heart of greed and the fragile bonds of family. Yet, as the sun rises over Blackthorn Manor, we're left to ponder what secrets lie hidden in the shadows of our own lives. What riddles await your discovery? What did you think of this thrilling conclusion? Did the final twist of Lady Eleanor and Mrs. Harrow's betrayal catch you by surprise? Share your thoughts and tell us where you're listening from. perhaps a misty moor, a bustling city, or a quiet corner by a fire? Drop your location and reactions in the comments below, and don't miss out. Subscribe to the channel for more gripping Sherlock Holmes adventures. The next mystery is just a click away.